You know, when I hear Boeing, I think of like those giant airplanes, you know the ones.
Hmm.
But the stuff you've dug up, all those Wikipedia rabbit holes and company timelines, it makes me think there's got to be more to this whole aerospace thing, right?
It's true. There's a lot more to it than just those big planes. It's like you're trying to figure out how Boeing became, well, Boeing.
Yeah, exactly. So where do we even begin?
Well, we could always start at the beginning.
Makes sense to me.
All right. So picture this. 1916, we've got William Boeing, lumber tycoon, right? And he decides, you know what? I'm going to build airplanes now. Wild, huh?
Talk about a career shift. What could have possessed him to make a jump like that?
Well, the early 1900s, it was a time of crazy new inventions, and everybody was obsessed with flying, you know? And Boeing, with all his experience in timber and building things, he probably saw a golden opportunity. He probably thought, hey, I can be a part of this whole flying revolution.
And that's where the B&W seaplane comes in.
Bingo.
I mean, it's a long way from those jumbo jets we see today. Puts things in perspective.
For sure. And getting from seaplanes to basically defining the jet age, that's quite a story. Boeing's journey, it's like totally intertwined with some of the biggest moments in history.
You talk about airmail taking off, World War II happening, then the whole jet age exploding.
Yeah.
Those are some serious historical waves they rode.
You got it. Think about World War II, for example. Boeing, they became like the go-to for bomber planes during the war. And it wasn't just about keeping up with demand. It was about making more planes, better designs, showing off their engineering skills to the whole world, really. That's what really shaped what Boeing could do and set them up to be huge in the jet age.
And then, bam, the Boeing 707 enters the scene and commercial flight changes forever. But your research mentions this whole thing in '97, the McDonnell-Douglas merger. That wasn't just two companies teaming up, was it? Sounds more like a culture clash.
You hit the nail on the head. See, Boeing is all about engineering and new ideas, and then McDonnell Douglas comes along, and they're all about the bottom line, making a profit. This clash of cultures, it's key to understanding what happened to Boeing later on, especially with that whole 737 MX situation.
You're saying that merger might have been the start of some serious problems down the line. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it kind of brings us to Boeing as it is now. Like, when you picture Boeing in your head, you see these big passenger jets, right? But they do way more than just fly people around.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's military contracts, space stuff, the whole shebang, right?
Exactly. If you look at the Boeing Wikipedia.pdf, they've got these three main parts of the company. They've got the commercial airplanes part, obviously, but then there's defense, space security, and global services. Each one's like its own massive thing.
So not just planes to fly me to, like Cancun, but also fighter jets, satellites, maybe even those super secret spy planes you hear about.
You're not wrong. The International Space Station, those fancy missile defense systems, Boeing's had a hand in a lot of it. And their influence is pretty major. Don't forget, we're talking about one of the biggest defense contractors in the world here and the biggest exporter in the entire U.S. That's some serious power, right?
You're kidding. They're like a giant in the industry. Speaking of influence, something in that Wikipedia article really caught my eye. All those headquarters moves. Seattle to Chicago, and then Chicago to Arlington, Virginia, practically next door to the White House. Seems kind of strategic, right?
It's hard to ignore, right? Being closer to where all those government and defense decisions are made definitely puts them in a good spot.
Makes you think they know how to play the game, the business and politics game. But for all this talk about power and innovation, we got to address the big one. The 737 MIX crashes.
Yeah, there's no downplaying how big of a deal those were. 2018, 2019, two brand new 737 MX planes, gone. Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines. Suddenly, this plane that was supposed to be all about progress, it's tied to these awful tragedies.
And it wasn't just a one-time thing either, was it?
Yeah.
The investigations, they showed there were some deeper issues at Boeing. Something about a flight control system, MCS.
Right, MCS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Basically, it was meant to stop the plane from stalling in midair. Problem was, if MCS messed up, it could force the plane's nose down, even if the pilots were trying to pull up. That's what led to the crashes.
Wow, that's scary. Just shows that even with all that tech, the smallest thing can go wrong and boom, disaster.
Right.
And then there's what happened after. The groundings, investigations, the fines. Seemed like Boeing just kept making things worse.
Yeah, at first it seemed like they were trying to dodge the blame and say everything was fine, but as more came out, they had everyone on their case. Regulators, the public, even their own people. The whole 737 MX fleet was girded, investigations everywhere, massive fines. But even that, it couldn't really make up for the lives lost.
For sure. That downfall documentary you sent, that really gets to the heart of it. It's like they were putting profits ahead of safety, which makes you think about that culture clash we talked about before. Do you think that McDonnell-Douglas merger, did that push Boeing to be more about the money, even if it meant more risk?
It's a question that's followed Boeing for sure. The documentary, other reports, they all ask if the pressure to make money and beat the competition, did it make them cut corners on safety? Did that merger, the one that was supposed to make them stronger, actually lead to all this? Something to think about, that's for sure.
And as if the 737 MX wasn't enough, there was that Alaska Airlines flight, the one where the door plug almost caused a disaster. Makes you wonder, are these isolated incidents or something more serious at Boeing?
It's a worry, for sure. That Alaska Airlines thing, at least it didn't end in tragedy, but it makes you think, along with some other things that have come out. Quality control, oversight, are they really making sure things are safe at every level?
And these aren't just what-if worries, are they? Yeah, the FAA's all over them. The Justice Department's investigating. Boeing's CEO and chairman even stepped down. That's serious stuff.
No doubt about it. It tells you there's something deeper going on that they need to fix. Seems like Boeing's in some rough air right now. Question is, can they get out of it, or will they just keep getting tossed around?
They're used to being on top, and now they're in the thick of it. But we got to remember, this isn't just about planes and money. It's about how Boeing affects the world.
You got it. We've talked about their rise, their power, their struggles, but to really get Boeing, we need to look at their environmental impact and all the politics involved. And that, my friend, is where things get really interesting.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, Boeing's journey, starting with those early seaplanes to becoming this huge company. And we've talked about the rough times they've hit, like with safety and whether people can trust them.
Right, and we can't forget about the environment, right? Building and flying all those planes, that's got to have an impact.
Absolutely. It's not exactly a light footprint, is it?
No, it's not. You mentioned environmental concerns, and the Wikipedia article, it talks about this place, the Santa Susana Field Laboratory.
Right, I saw that. Something about contamination.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. The site was used for testing rockets, and Boeing was involved. Now that they're trying to clean it up, but there are still lawsuits and stuff. It kind of shows you how some industrial practices can have, like, really long-term effects.
Definitely a reminder that progress isn't always pretty. But what about right now? Is Boeing doing anything to be more, green? Air travel is a big part of the whole climate change issue.
They are putting money into sustainable aviation fuels, which is a step in the right direction.
Oh, like biofuels.
Exactly. Your research mentioned biofuels from algae and jactropha plants. Boeing says these could be a game changer, much lower emissions than regular jet fuel.
That's good to hear. But is it enough to just invest in greener tech? I mean, people aren't going to stop flying, right? That means more planes in the sky no matter what.
That's the tough part, isn't it? Trying to be eco-friendly, but also the demand for flights is only going up.
It's a tricky balance for sure. And speaking of tricky, your research also hinted at some, let's say, interesting connections between Boeing and the political world.
Right, we talked about them moving to Arlington, but it goes deeper than that. Remember, Boeing's a major federal contractor.
Right. So what does that even mean, really, besides getting contracts from the government?
It's a whole web of connections, lobbying, campaign donations. We're talking billions of dollars in contracts, That kind of money comes with influence.
Yeah, you don't say.
Mm-hmm.
The Wikipedia article mentioned something about them getting huge tax breaks back in 2013. Kind of makes you wonder.
For sure. And it's not just the money either. Some people criticize Boeing for supplying military equipment to places with conflicts like Yemen and Gaza. They say Boeing's profiting from war.
That's a heavy accusation. It adds a whole other layer to their story, doesn't it? It's not
Yeah.
just building cool planes anymore. It's about what those planes are used for, the ethics of it all.
Exactly. And that sparks a bigger conversation about companies having a responsibility to do what's right, even on a global scale. The decisions they make, they have real-world consequences.
No doubt about it. So after everything we've learned, where does this leave Boeing? They've had safety issues, ethical questions, their impact on the environment. What does the future hold for them?
Well, they've had some rough times lately. The 737 MX issues, the pandemic messing with air travel, even labor strikes. Shows there are problems on the inside, too.
Yeah, it's been a bumpy ride for them.
But they're also trying new things. They bought this company, Whisk Aero, that does autonomous air taxis, and they brought back Spirit Aerosystems, a big parts supplier.
So they're trying to innovate, change things up.
Seems like it, and everyone's watching their new CEO, Kelly Ortberg. Can he get them back on track? Can he make safety, sustainability, ethical behavior not just something they say, but what they really do? That's the billion-dollar question.
It really is. This whole deep dive into Boeing, it's been fascinating, but also kind of complex. Like those intricate planes they build, there are a lot of moving parts.
That's a good way to put it.
It's a story of amazing things they've done, but also some serious mistakes and the need to be accountable for those mistakes.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up here, I think the biggest takeaway is that sometimes the most interesting journeys, they leave us with more questions than answers. What's next for Boeing? I guess we'll just have to wait and see.